Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Neuro-Nurture Podcast, where we keep it real about raising neurodivergent kids. I'm Jasmine.
And I'm Maya. And oh my goodness, the response to last week's episode about masking was just...
We were not ready. The DMs, the comments, parents saying, "I cried in my car." That one really hit people. We also heard from adults who were diagnosed later in life saying they wished their parents had had this kind of information.
It really did. And you know, the number one message we got after that episode over and over was some version of, okay, I think my child is masking, now what? How do I actually get them assessed?
Exactly, and that is what we're getting into today. The whole diagnosis journey, all of it. How to even start, how to push for an evaluation, what to do when you're stuck on a waitlist that feels like it goes on forever, and what actually happens when you finally get those answers. We want this to be a real, practical guide because nobody hands you a roadmap for this. You're just supposed to figure
it out on your own, in the dark.
Not on our watch. Let's get into it. Okay, so let's start at the very, very beginning. You suspect your child might be neurodivergent. Maybe you just listened to our masking episode and everything clicked. Maybe a teacher flagged something. Or maybe your gut has just been telling you something for years. What do you actually do first? First thing, write it down. Before you make a single phone call, before you do anything
else, sit down and write out everything you're observing. And I mean everything, not just the big dramatic meltdowns.
Right, the small everyday stuff.
The small stuff is the most important. How long does homework take, really? What does bedtime look like? How do they handle transitions? Even small ones like leaving the park. What do they do the second they get home from school? All of it.
Because when you get into a doctor's office, you're going to be nervous, they're going to be busy, and your mind will go completely blank at the worst possible moment. Your notes are your evidence. Exactly. So once you have your notes, step 2 is to start with your pediatrician.
They're your first port of call. You don't need to go in there with a self-diagnosis. You can just say simply, I have some concerns about my child's development,
and I'd like a referral for a full evaluation. You just have to open the door. And here is something really important, and I want every parent to hear this. You are allowed to be persistent. If your pediatrician dismisses your concerns the first time or says, let's wait and see, you can come back. You can bring your notes. You can ask specifically for a developmental pediatrician referral. Don't be afraid to advocate.
And if they still brush you off, you can get a second opinion. You can self-refer to a developmental psychologist in many cases. You have options. You are not stuck.
So true. And then there's the other route, and this is one a lot of parents don't know about, which is going directly through the school. If your child is school-aged, you can request a school-based evaluation in writing.
In writing is the key part.
Yes, the school is legally required to respond to that written request, usually within a specific time frame, and that evaluation is completely free. And it can happen alongside or instead of a private evaluation, depending on your situation. But we need to clarify something here because this is a big point of confusion. Yes, the school evaluation and a private clinical evaluation are not the same thing. The school evaluation determines what support your child needs in an educational setting to access their education, like extra time on tests or a quiet space to work. A clinical evaluation provides a medical diagnosis, which can be the key to getting therapies and other services outside of school. They are both important and they do different things.
Think of it this way. The school evaluation gets your child support at school, like an IEP or a 504 plan. The clinical diagnosis gives you the full picture, what's actually going on neurologically and why. Both are incredibly valuable.
Okay, so you've done it. You've made the calls, you've gotten the referral, and then you hear those words that make every parent's heart just sink. The wait is 6 to 18 months.
The wait list, it is the absolute bane of this community's existence.
And I want to be real, it is genuinely awful. It feels hopeless. You have a child who is struggling right now, and you're being told to wait a year, maybe more.
It's terrible. So let's talk about what you actually can do in that time, because you are not powerless. You can be proactive.
Okay, first strategy, get on multiple lists. Don't just call one practice and wait. Call every evaluator in your area, in your state. Look at telehealth options. Get on all the lists. Whoever gets you first, you go.
Yes, and when you call, ask to be put on the cancellation list. People cancel appointments all the time. If you're available on short notice, you can sometimes move up significantly faster.
Such a good tip. Okay, number 3, start support now. You do not need a diagnosis to access many types of support. You can start occupational therapies, speech therapy, or family counseling without a formal diagnosis in many cases. Don't wait to get help.
And number 4, just like we said, go through the school. If you submitted that written request for a school evaluation, the school legally has 60 days to complete it in most states. That is so much faster than a clinical wait list.
So much faster. Number 5, document everything. Keep that running journal during the wait. Behaviors, patterns, what makes a good day, what makes a hard day. All of that becomes incredibly useful information for the evaluator when you finally see them. And the
Last one, number 6, and this might be the most important. Find your community. Find the Facebook groups, the Reddit communities, the local parent networks. The parents who are in the diagnosis process or just finished it, they know which evaluators are good. They know the ins and outs of the local system.
Yes, you do not have to figure this out alone. Someone has already done it, and they will tell you everything. That last one is so key. Finding your people can make all the difference. We're not talking about just venting, which is important, but getting real, practical, local advice. Okay, so you've made it through the waitlist, a miracle has occurred, and evaluation day is here. What should parents expect?
So evaluations vary a lot depending on what's being assessed. Autism, ADHD, learning disabilities, giftedness, or a combination. But there are some things that are pretty consistent across the board.
First, it usually takes more than one session. A comprehensive evaluation can take anywhere from 3 to 8 hours total, and it's often spread across multiple appointments, so the child doesn't get too fatigued.
Right, and it typically involves the child being assessed directly through standardized tests, observations, sometimes play-based activities for younger kids. It also involves parents filling out a ton of questionnaires, so many questionnaires, and doing a detailed interview about your child's developmental history. Teachers are often asked to fill out questionnaires too.
And here is something parents often don't expect. The evaluator is looking at a lot more than just the presenting concern. They're not just looking for deficits. A good evaluator is also looking for your child's strengths. They're building a full picture of how your child's brain works, their strengths and their challenges, which is why that
Developmental history matters so much. They'll ask about things like, were there any complications during pregnancy or birth? When did they hit language milestones? How did they handle transitions as a toddler? All of it paints a picture.
One thing I really want parents to hear is be honest in those questionnaires. I know it can feel like you're reporting on your own child. It can feel really uncomfortable, but underreporting means the evaluator gets an incomplete picture.
Yes, your job in that room is not to protect your child's reputation. Your job is to make sure they get an accurate evaluation, and accurate means honest.
So true. Then after the evaluation, there's usually a feedback session where the evaluator walks you through the results. This is where you get answers, and sometimes where everything suddenly, finally makes sense. And sometimes it raises more questions, and that is
okay too. Let's talk about that moment, the moment you get answers, because it's not always what people expect emotionally.
not at all. Some parents feel this overwhelming sense of relief, like finally a name for what we've been living with. Finally proof that I wasn't imagining it, that I wasn't crazy.
And some parents grieve. Even if they suspected the diagnosis, hearing it confirmed can bring up a lot of feelings. Sadness, fear about what their child's life will look like, guilt sometimes, even though there's nothing to feel guilty about.
Out. And some parents feel both at the same time. You can feel relief that you finally have answers and also grief for the child you thought you would have. That is completely normal, and both of those feelings are valid. It's okay to feel all the things. What I want parents to know is a diagnosis doesn't change your child. Your child is the same person they were before that appointment. The diagnosis just gives you a better map for supporting them. It's a roadmap. I love that. Okay, so what are the first steps after you get that diagnosis? Number 1, ask for a copy of the full report, not just the summary. The full report contains detailed information that will be useful for schools, therapists, and doctors.
Number 2, bring that report to your child's school and request a meeting to discuss accommodations or services. A diagnosis is a powerful document in an IEP or 504 meeting.
Number 3, connect with specialists who work specifically with your child's diagnosis. A therapist who specializes in autism or ADHD will know things a general practitioner simply won't.
Number 4, tell your child in an age-appropriate way. Kids do better when they understand their own brain. There are incredible books for every age that explain neurodivergence in a way that builds identity and pride, not shame.
Yes, we'll link some of our favorites in the description. And finally, number 5, after you get the diagnosis, give yourself a week before you start making any big decisions. Let yourself process. Research mode can wait 7 days. Your feelings cannot. That's such a crucial point, Maya. Protecting your own emotional well-being is part of this journey. And once you've had that moment to breathe, the next big step is often building your child's support team. Because it's not just about getting the diagnosis paper, it's about what you do with it. It's about assembling a group of people who will help your child thrive. That's such a crucial point, Maya. Protecting your own emotional well-being is part of this journey. And once you've had that moment to breathe, the next big step is often building your child's support team. Because it's not just about getting the diagnosis paper, it's about what you do with it. It's about assembling a group of people who will help your child thrive. You know, I want to talk for a second
about how hard this process is on parents, because we focus so much on the child, which is right, but the parent is going through something too.
Oh, 100%. You are fighting for your child while also managing your own fear, your own grief, your own exhaustion from being the one who sees what everyone else is missing.
I remember when we were in the thick of the diagnosis process for my son. There were days where I just felt so alone, like I was screaming into a void and nobody was taking me seriously. It's an incredibly isolating feeling.
And then when you finally get that answer, when someone finally validates what you knew in your gut all along, there is this enormous exhale. Like you can finally put down a weight you didn't even realize you've been carrying.
Yes. So to any parent in that process right now, you are not being difficult. You are not overreacting. You are doing the most important work of your life, and it matters.
Keep going. Your child needs you to keep going. Okay, let's do a quick tips round. One thing each of us swears by. Maya, you go first. Mine is simple. Write the request
for a school evaluation in an email, not verbally, in writing. The moment it's in writing, it becomes a legal document with a legally required response timeline. An email beats a hallway conversation every single time.
So good. Okay, mine is about the feedback meeting after the evaluation. Bring someone with you, a partner, a friend, anyone, because you will be in an emotional state and you will not retain everything the evaluator says. You need someone there who is just taking notes while you process. That is such good advice. You absolutely cannot absorb everything in that moment alone. And the last tip, which we mentioned, but it's worth repeating, after you get the diagnosis, give yourself that week. Let yourself process. Research mode can wait 7 days. Your feelings cannot. Protect that space for yourself. And that is a wrap on episode 4 of the Neuro-Nurture Podcast. Thank you so much for being here. This one was a big one, and I really hope it gave you exactly what you needed today. If this helped you, please share it. Forward it to the parent who's just starting this journey and has no idea where to begin. That one share might change everything for their family. You can find us on all the socials at Neuro-Nurture Podcast. Our DMs are always open. And if you have a topic you want us to cover, please tell us. We are building this with you. And next episode, we are tackling something so many of you have asked about. Emotional dysregulation, the big feelings, the explosive
moments, why they happen, and what actually helps. It is going to be a
good one. Until then, keep nurturing those incredible neurospicy kiddos and yourselves. You matter too.